She sat in the cheapest seat, wearing a faded jacket, cleaning up her daughter's spilled juice while rich passengers judged her silently. 2 hours later, the captain's voice came on the intercom, desperate, searching for a pilot. The woman they had humiliated quietly stood up. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The cabin of Flight 447 was already loud before the plane even left the gate. People were pushing bags into overhead bins. A baby was crying somewhere near the back. A group of businessmen in the middle rows were laughing too hard at something on one of their phones. The air smelled like recycled cold and cheap coffee. It was the kind of flight that nobody enjoyed but everybody took because it was the cheapest option on the board. Nadia Reyes sat in seat 31C, the aisle seat, with her 7-year-old daughter Sofia pressed against her side in the middle seat. Sofia was small for her age, with dark curly hair that always seemed to escape whatever style Nadia tried to put it in. That morning it was in 2 loose braids that had already started to come undone. Sofia was wearing her favorite yellow sweater, the one with the small embroidered sun on the pocket, and she was holding a worn paperback book about ocean animals in her lap. Nadia was 36 years old. She had dark circles under her eyes that no amount of sleep seemed to fix anymore. Her jacket was clean but old, a deep green color that had faded slightly at the shoulders. She carried a single backpack and a small tote bag. That was everything. She had packed carefully, the way she did everything now, carefully, quietly, without wasting a single thing. She was a single mother. Had been for 4 years, since her husband Marcus died in a construction accident when Sofia was 3. After that, Nadia had sold the house, moved into a smaller apartment, taken a second job on weekends at a diner, and slowly, steadily rebuilt the structure of their lives. She did not talk about it much. She did not need people to feel sorry for her. She just needed to get through each day without falling apart, and most days she managed that. This trip was for a job interview. A real one, at a logistics company in Seattle that had emailed her twice and then called her personally. It was the kind of opportunity that did not come often. The kind that, if it worked out, meant Sofia could stop sharing a bedroom with her mother and they could maybe afford a second pair of shoes that were not bought from a sale rack. Nadia had booked the cheapest seats. She always booked the cheapest seats. Sofia leaned up and whispered something in her ear. Nadia smiled and whispered back. Sofia giggled quietly and went back to her book. It was the kind of small, private moment that exists only between a parent and a child, invisible to everyone around them, worth more than anything else in the world. In the row ahead of them, a man in a pressed gray suit turned around and stared. He looked at Sofia's book. He looked at Nadia's backpack sitting in the seat pocket. Then he looked at Nadia herself with the kind of expression that did not need words. It was the look that said, "You are in the wrong place and you are inconveniencing me by being here." Nadia looked back at him calmly. He turned around. 3 rows forward, separated from economy by the blue curtain that airlines use to pretend 2 completely different worlds are not sitting within 40 feet of each other, business class was settling in. The seats were wider. The armrests did not dig into your sides. The flight attendants moved through that section with a different energy, smoother, more attentive, as if the people there required a special kind of care that economy passengers simply did not deserve. In seat 4A sat a woman named Diane Calloway. She was 52, the founder and CEO of a mid-size investment consulting firm. She wore a charcoal blazer and a silk scarf, and her silver-streaked hair was cut short and precise. She had a glass of sparkling water in front of her and a laptop open on the tray table. She was the kind of person who had not stood in a normal line in years. Everything in her life had been arranged, expedited, smoothed out. She was also the kind of person who believed, deeply and without examination, that the way someone looked told you everything important about them. The shoes. The jacket. The quality of the bag. The way a person held themselves in a space. These were not prejudices to her. They were data points. She had built an entire career on reading people quickly and making decisions, and she had never once stopped to question whether the system she was using to read them was accurate. She noticed Nadia when the economy passengers filed past to reach the back of the plane. She noticed the faded jacket. The two braids coming undone. The child who was slightly too loud when she asked her mother something about the window. Diane said nothing in that moment. She simply noted it, filed it away, and went back to her laptop. The plane pushed back from the gate at 9:14 in the morning. The safety demonstration played. The flight attendants walked the aisles. Nadia helped Sophia buckle her seatbelt and showed her how to adjust it. Sophia immediately unbuckled it to try again herself. Nadia let her. Takeoff was smooth. The city fell away below them and the sky opened up white and wide. Sophia pressed her face against the oval window and said wow very softly. Nadia watched her daughter's face and felt, briefly, like everything might be okay. About 40 minutes into the flight, the cabin crew began the drink service. A flight attendant named Priya worked the economy section with a cart, moving efficiently down the narrow aisle. She had a kind face and a practiced calm that came from years of managing small crises in a pressurized metal tube at 35,000 feet. Sophia asked for apple juice. Priya smiled and handed it to her. Sophia said thank you in a very serious voice, the way children do when they are trying hard to use their manners. Priya said you are very welcome, young lady. Sophia looked pleased. The apple juice, as apple juice sometimes does in the hands of a 7-year-old on a moving airplane, ended up on the floor. Not much. A small splash. Sophia froze, her eyes wide, looking at her mother. Nadia was already reaching for the napkins. She cleaned it up quickly, quietly, without fuss. Sophia kept apologizing in a whisper. Nadia said it was okay, it was just juice, it happened, and pressed a gentle kiss to the top of her daughter's head. But the spill had reached slightly into the aisle. The man in the gray suit 2 rows up had to step over it when he walked back from the front of the plane. He looked down at it. He looked at Nadia. And then he did what some people do when they want to make a point without technically saying anything directly, he made a sound. A sharp, brief exhale through the nose. The sound of someone who has found exactly the confirmation they were looking for. He passed through the blue curtain into business class. Nadia heard his voice, not every word, but enough. The tone of it. The way he lowered his voice just slightly but not quite enough, the way people do when they want to be overheard but maintain plausible deniability. She heard the word children. She heard the word inconvenience. And then she heard Diane Calloway's voice, clear and carrying, from her seat in 4A. I honestly don't understand why they allow small children in economy on long flights. It is completely unfair to the other passengers. Some of us are trying to work. The blue curtain was thin. The cabin was not that large. Several people in the front rows of economy heard it. One older woman near the window closed her eyes briefly. A younger man with headphones paused whatever he was listening to and looked toward the curtain. Sophia had heard it too. Nadia felt her daughter go very still beside her. The way a child goes still when they have heard something they did not fully understand but understood was about them. Sophia looked up at her mother. Her voice was very quiet. Did she mean us, Mama? Nadia put her arm around her daughter. She said, some people say things they don't mean, baby. Don't worry about it. But she was lying. She knew it. And somewhere under the careful, disciplined calm she had built around herself over 4 years of doing everything alone, something tightened. Not anger, exactly. Something older and quieter than anger. The feeling of a person who has already lost so much and still has to stand in front of people who see nothing when they look at her. She held Sophia a little closer. Sophia leaned against her and went back to her book. Nadia stared at the seat back in front of her and breathed slowly and did not say a word. What Diane Calloway did not know, could not have known, and had not bothered to find out, was who Nadia Reyes actually was. Before Sophia. Before Marcus. Before the apartment and the diner and the careful, quiet reconstruction of a life, before all of that, Nadia had been something else entirely. She had grown up near an airfield in New Mexico, the daughter of a man who repaired small aircraft for a living. By the time she was 12 she could name every part of a piston engine. By 15 she had logged her first flight hours. By 22 she had a commercial pilot's license, an instrument rating, and a job flying cargo for a regional freight company. By 28 she was a first officer for a mid-sized domestic airline, flying Boeing 737s up and down the West Coast. By 30 she had her captain's certification. She was one of the youngest female captains the company had ever trained, and one of the very few. The other pilots called her Steady, which was not a formal call sign but a name that stuck because of the quality it described. In turbulence, in crosswinds, in the middle of hydraulic warnings and engine alerts and situations that made other pilots tense up, Nadia Reyes went quiet and precise. Her hands never shook. Her voice never changed. She just worked the problem. Then Marcus died. Then Sophia needed her mother to be present in a way that flying schedules simply could not accommodate. Then came the choice that no one talks about, the one that does not fit on a resume or into a conversation at a dinner party, the choice to step down from the thing you are best at because someone you love needs something more than the thing you are best at. She had surrendered her active type rating 18 months ago. She still held her licenses. She still kept up with the technical bulletins, out of habit, the way some people keep reading about a sport they no longer play. The knowledge was still in her. It had not gone anywhere. It was simply not being used. The faded jacket. The undone braids. The apple juice on the floor. None of it told Diane Calloway anything true. None of it came close. They were 2 hours into the flight when Nadia felt it. It started as something very subtle. A vibration in the airframe that was slightly wrong. Not the normal steady hum of cruise altitude. Something underneath that, a faint, irregular pulse that came and went in short intervals. She had felt it once before, years ago, in a training scenario. A partial hydraulic pressure loss on the left side, the kind that the autopilot could mask for a while before the symptoms became undeniable. She sat up straighter. She put her hand flat on the armrest and pressed lightly. The vibration was there. Faint. Real. She looked at the condensation on the inside of the window. It was shivering at a frequency that did not match the normal engine rhythm. She listened to the engine note. It was steady, but the airframe was telling a slightly different story. These were not the sounds and sensations of a healthy aircraft in cruise. These were early warning signs, the kind that passengers never noticed and that pilots were specifically trained to catch before they became something worse. Her mind ran through the checklist the way it always had, automatic, fast, certain. The irregular vibration. The slight asymmetry she could feel in how the plane was tracking. The faint change in the engine tone that came and went. Hypothesis, partial hydraulic failure, left main system. The autopilot would be compensating. The pilots would be aware of an instrument flag. The question was how serious it was and how fast it was progressing. She looked at Sophia, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder, her book open and forgotten in her lap. Nadia's expression did not change. Inside, her heart rate had climbed exactly the way it always climbed in the early stages of an emergency, not with panic, but with focus. Everything narrowed. The noise of the cabin fell away. There was only the aircraft, and what it was telling her. 20 seconds later, the seatbelt sign came on without announcement. 30 seconds after that, the plane dropped. Not a turbulence drop, a mechanical drop, clean and sudden, the kind that came from flight control surfaces losing partial authority. Several passengers gasped. A woman behind Nadia grabbed her husband's arm. The baby that had been quiet for the last hour started crying again, louder this time. The intercom crackled. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the flight deck. We are experiencing a technical issue with one of our flight control systems. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We are currently assessing the situation and will update you shortly. The voice was calm. Professional. But Nadia had spent years listening to the space between the words in cockpit communications, and she heard what the calm voice was covering. She heard the effort in it. She heard a man who was very busy. In business class, Diane Calloway closed her laptop. The sparkling water she had been ignoring for 20 minutes slid an inch to the left on her tray table. She looked out the window. The horizon appeared to tilt very slightly, then correct itself. She pressed the call button for the flight attendant. No one came. The man in the gray suit, who had gone back to business class after his walk, was now gripping both armrests. His face had changed. The look of someone who has spent his whole life believing that the seat he was sitting in guaranteed a certain kind of safety had been replaced by something much older and much more basic. Nadia was already calculating. The left hydraulic system, if that was the failure, controlled the left aileron, the left spoilers, and part of the elevator authority. A partial loss was manageable but narrow. If the secondary system was also compromised, if this was a dual failure, then they were in real trouble. The pilots would be fighting the yoke to maintain level flight. They would be burning through their checklists. They would be doing the exact thing she had trained to do, but with the added weight of 200 people behind them and a control surface that was not responding the way it should. The plane lurched again. This time it was sharper. The overhead bins rattled. Someone in the back screamed. Sophia woke up and grabbed her mother's arm. "Mama? What is happening?" "There is a problem with the plane," Nadia said. Her voice was level. "But the pilots are working on it. You need to sit up straight and keep your seatbelt on." Sophia looked at her mother's face, at the steadiness of it, the absolute calm, and something in the child settled. She straightened up. She pulled her seatbelt tighter. She did not ask another question. The intercom sounded again. But this time it was not the pre-recorded tone, and the voice was different. Rougher. Tighter. A voice under pressure that was keeping itself controlled through sheer professional discipline. "This is Captain Hale. I am going to be direct with you. We have lost primary hydraulic pressure on the left side and we are experiencing reduced authority on the flight controls. My first officer has been incapacitated, he has had a medical event and is unable to assist. I am managing the aircraft manually. This is a serious situation." The cabin went completely silent. Not the silence of people listening. The silence of 200 people suddenly understanding that the world they thought was solid had become something else. "I need help. I need someone with advanced flight experience, specifically, experience on commercial aircraft or high-performance multi-engine planes. If there is anyone on board with that background, please identify yourself to a flight attendant immediately. This is not a drill. I need that person in the cockpit now." The silence held for a long moment. People looked at each other. Some looked at the aisle, as if expecting someone to materialize. A man near the front stood up halfway and then sat back down. An older gentleman near the emergency exit raised his hand slightly and then lowered it, shaking his head. Whatever experience he had was decades gone. In business class, Diane Calloway was staring at the curtain. Her mouth was slightly open. She was waiting for someone to appear. Someone in a uniform. Someone official. Someone who looked the part. Her flight attendant, Priya, had walked back to the economy section. She was speaking quietly and quickly, moving down the aisle, asking. "Does anyone here have flight experience? Does anyone here have a pilot's license?" Her voice was calm but her eyes were urgent. She reached row 31. Nadia Reyes had already undone her seatbelt. She looked at Sophia. "I need you to stay in this seat. Do not move. Keep your seatbelt on. I will be back." She cupped her daughter's face for 1 second. "I promise." Sophia looked at her mother, really looked at her, and in that moment something shifted in the child's understanding of who her mother was. She nodded. She did not cry. She buckled her seatbelt one more time, checked it with both hands, and held her ocean animals book against her chest. Nadia stood up. She was not tall. She was not particularly imposing. She was wearing a faded green jacket and her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she looked, to anyone glancing at her, like a tired woman in economy class who should sit back down. She looked at Priya and spoke quietly and clearly. "My name is Nadia Reyes. I hold an ATP license and a Boeing 737 type rating. I have over 6,000 hours on commercial aircraft, including approximately 900 hours as captain. Tell the flight deck I am coming." Priya stared at her for exactly 1 second. Then she grabbed her radio. The walk from seat 31C to the cockpit door was perhaps 40 steps. Nadia walked them in a straight line, not fast, not slow. The people she passed looked up at her. Some of them frowned, confused. Who was this woman? Why was she walking forward? Why was she not sitting down like everyone else? She passed through the blue curtain. Diane Calloway looked up from her seat as Nadia walked past. She saw the faded green jacket. She saw the simple ponytail. She saw the face that was completely without panic, completely without hesitation, completely focused on something ahead of it. It took Diane 3 seconds to recognize the woman. The woman from economy. The mother with the small girl and the apple juice on the floor. The woman whose child she had described as an inconvenience. And she understood, in those 3 seconds, in a way that no argument or explanation could have produced, what she had done. Nadia did not look at Diane Calloway. She did not have time, and more than that, she simply did not care. There was a problem ahead of her that required everything she had. Everything else could wait. The flight attendant knocked twice on the cockpit door and gave the code. The lock clicked. Nadia stepped inside. The cockpit was exactly what she had expected and also, in the specific details of this moment, more serious than she had hoped. Captain Hale was a man of about 50, with strong hands and gray at his temples and sweat on the back of his neck. The first officer, a younger man, was slumped against the window with his headset still on, his face pale. The warning lights on the panel were not subtle. The left hydraulic pressure gauge was deep in the red. The autopilot was off. The yoke was moving with the small, constant corrections of a man who had been doing this alone for too long and whose arms were beginning to feel it. Captain Hale looked at her. His eyes asked the question his voice did not have time for. "Nadia Reyes," she said. 6,000 hours. 737 type rating. 900 as captain. Tell me what you have. He told her. It took 30 seconds. She listened with the particular quality of attention that pilots develop, where everything that matters is absorbed instantly and everything that does not matter does not register at all. "Left main hydraulic is gone," he said. "Secondary is partially compromised. I have maybe 60% authority on the left side. I have been holding it manually for 20 minutes. My arms are starting to fight me." She was already in the right seat. She put on the headset. She put her hands on the yoke and felt the aircraft for 3 seconds, just felt it, the way you feel something in the dark to understand its shape. "I have the aircraft," she said. Captain Hale said, "You have the aircraft." And she flew. What happened over the next 45 minutes was not dramatic in the way that movies make emergencies dramatic. There was no music. There was no single heroic moment. There was only the continuous, grinding, precise work of keeping a damaged aircraft level and moving it toward a surface it could safely reach. Nadia used differential thrust to compensate for the reduced left-side control authority. She used the rudder in a way that commercial pilots rarely need to use it, firmly, deliberately, in careful coordination with what control surface authority she still had. She talked to Captain Hale in the clipped, efficient language of people who have practiced the same drills and know the same checklists and do not need to waste words. She talked to the Seattle approach controller on the radio in the same voice she always used, calm, clear, specific. She requested priority handling. She was given it without question. The controller cleared the airspace around them. Emergency services were notified. A long runway was cleared. She did not think about Diane Calloway. She did not think about the gray-suited man and his exhale. She did not think about the apartment or the job interview or the second pair of shoes. She thought about the aircraft. She thought about the 200 people behind her. She thought about Sophia, sitting in seat 31C with her Ocean Animals book held against her chest, waiting. Captain Hale sat beside her and managed the radio when she needed both hands. He read checklists. He watched the gauges and called out the numbers. He was, in these minutes, exactly what she needed him to be, and she was exactly what he needed her to be. Two professionals working a problem together with everything they had. In the cabin, the flight attendants moved through the rows and gave instructions. Stay seated. Seatbelts tight. Brace position on command. Their voices were controlled. The passengers were not. Some were crying quietly. Some were praying. Some were recording videos on their phones with shaking hands, the way people do when they feel the urge to make something real by documenting it. Diane Calloway sat in her wide seat with her hands flat on her thighs and her eyes fixed on the curtain. She was thinking about the woman in the faded green jacket. She was thinking about the words she had said, still floating in the air of the cabin from 2 hours ago. She was thinking about the casual certainty with which she had delivered them, the confidence of someone who had never once been wrong in a way that mattered. Sophia sat in seat 31C. She did not move. She did not unbuckle her seatbelt. She held her book and she watched the gap in the curtain where her mother had disappeared, and she waited. She was 7 years old. She was the bravest person on the plane. The approach to Seattle began at a slightly higher speed than normal, a decision Nadia had made to maintain better control authority in the reduced hydraulic state. The runway was long and clear. Emergency vehicles were already positioned along the sides of it, lights flashing in the gray morning. Captain Hale said, "I'll take it for final if you want." "I have it," Nadia said. Not aggressive. Just clear. He nodded. He did not argue. He had felt her hands on the aircraft for the last 40 minutes and he knew exactly what she was. The landing was not smooth. It was not supposed to be. It was precise, controlled, and firm, the kind of landing that is not about comfort but about keeping the aircraft on the runway when one side has less braking authority than the other. She used the asymmetric thrust on rollout. She held the centerline. The aircraft decelerated steadily and came to a stop with 3,000 feet of runway remaining. For a moment, no one in the cabin moved or made a sound. Then, from somewhere in economy, someone started clapping. Then another person. Then it spread, the way these things spread when the release of something very large finds its moment, not all at once but in a wave, beginning at the back and rolling forward, until the entire economy cabin was applauding. Not a performance. Not a gesture. The sound of 180 people who had been holding their breath for 45 minutes finally, letting it go. In business class, it was quieter. Some people clapped. Some sat still and looked at the floor. Diane Calloway did not clap. She sat with her hands in her lap and her eyes very bright and said nothing. The evacuation was slow and orderly. Emergency services boarded and attended to the first officer, who was conscious but unwell. Captain Hale stood at the cockpit door as passengers filed past and shook hands where hands were offered. Nadia came out last. She had her backpack over one shoulder. Her hair was still in the same ponytail. She looked tired, the way you look when you have been very focused for a long time and the focus is finally releasing. She walked down the aisle to row 31. Sophia saw her coming and was on her feet before Nadia reached her, her seatbelt somehow already undone, her arms around her mother before Nadia had even fully stopped walking. Nadia held her daughter for a long moment with both arms, her eyes closed, her face pressed into the top of Sophia's head. "I told you," she said quietly. Sophia held on tighter. They were among the last to leave the plane. As they moved up the aisle toward the front, Nadia noticed Diane Calloway still in her seat. The woman was not looking at her laptop. She was not on her phone. She was sitting still, watching Nadia and Sophia walk toward her. When Nadia reached her row, Diane Calloway stood up. She was not a small woman. She was not used to looking up at situations. But she stood straight and she looked at Nadia directly and she said, in a voice that was stripped of everything, the performance, the authority, the accumulated habit of being above everything, "I owe you my life. I owe everyone on this plane an apology. What I said earlier was ugly and ignorant and I am not going to try to explain it." She paused. Her voice was careful but her eyes were not. Her eyes were raw. "I looked at you and I saw exactly what I expected to see, and I was completely wrong. I am sorry." She looked down at Sophia. "And I am sorry to you too, young lady. Your mother is extraordinary." Sophia looked up at the woman in the charcoal blazer and considered her very seriously for a moment. Then she said, in the polite and slightly solemn way of a child who has been taught to be gracious even when it is hard, "Thank you." Nadia did not say "you're welcome." She did not say "it's okay," because it was not quite okay, and she was not in the habit of pretending things were different from what they were. She looked at Diane Calloway for a moment. Then she said, simply, "Take care of yourself." And she walked off the plane with her daughter. Outside, the gray Seattle morning had a particular quality of light, flat and cool and very clean. Nadia and Sophia walked across the tarmac toward the terminal building. Around them, other passengers were moving in the same direction, some talking, some quiet, some still on their phones. A ground crew worker near the edge of the tarmac recognized something in Nadia's bearing, the way she walked, the way she looked back once at the aircraft with a particular kind of attention, and he nodded at her. She nodded back. Sophia was holding her mother's hand. After a moment she said, "Mama, were you scared?" Nadia thought about this. She believed in giving her daughter true answers when the true answers were available. "A little," she said. "But being scared does not mean you stop working. You feel it, and then you work anyway." Sophia thought about this. "Is that what flying is like? All the time?" "No," Nadia said. "Most of the time it is very calm and you just pay attention. Today was unusual. Are you going to fly again? Like for a job?" Nadia looked down at her daughter. She had not thought about that question in a long time, or rather she had carefully not thought about it. She had put it in a drawer a year and a half ago and locked the drawer and placed other things in front of it. But something about today, the feel of the yoke under her hands, the particular clarity of working a problem she was built to work, had moved those things aside. "Maybe," she said. "We will see." Sophia squeezed her hand. "I think you should. You are really good at it." Nadia laughed. It was a short, quiet laugh, the kind that surprises you. "How do you know?" "You were in the back." "Because we landed," Sophia said, with the simple logic of a 7-year-old. "And we are fine." Nadia squeezed her daughter's hand back and did not say anything else for a moment. She just walked, and breathed the cool Seattle air, and felt the solidity of the ground beneath her feet. There would be paperwork. There would be a debrief with the airline's safety team and the Civil Aviation Authority. There would be a formal record of what happened on Flight 447, with all the correct technical language and certification numbers and hours logged. Captain Hale would write a statement. The airline would issue a release. For a few days, there would probably be news stories. None of that was the point. The point was simpler and older than any of it. The point was that a woman had been seen as nothing, dismissed as inconvenient, reduced to a seat number and a faded jacket, and that same woman had been the only person in a sky full of people who could do what needed to be done. Not because she announced it. Not because she wore the right clothes or carried the right bag or sat in the right seat. Because she had spent years building something real, and real things do not disappear just because no one is looking at them. Diane Calloway walked off the plane that morning and understood, for the first time in a long time, that the system she had used to read people was not a system at all. It was a habit. A shortcut. A way of organizing the world that made it easier to move through but did not make it true. The most capable person in any room is very rarely the one who looks the most capable. That gap, between appearance and reality, between the seat and the person sitting in it, is where the real world actually lives. Nadia Reyes and her daughter walked into the terminal building and disappeared into the crowd, 2 people among hundreds, indistinguishable from everyone else. Just a mother and a small girl with dark curly hair and a yellow sweater with a sun on the pocket, carrying an ocean animals book, walking through a gray Seattle morning like it was any other day. Which, in every way that mattered, it was.